Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And my name's Mike Eshu, and my title is Senior Manager, Technical Program Management for AWS Managed Services. And I specifically focus on customer onboarding and adoption. I'm joined with my colleague, Trace, who will introduce himself, and he's going to take you through what he talks to customers about when they're considering looking for AWS Managed Services to help them with their operational needs.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. So my name is Trace Swan. I'm the worldwide lead of business development for AWS Managed Services. And today I'd like to walk you through some of the use cases and challenges that we heard from our customers in the enterprise space as we built the AMS service. So when we look back over the last 4 or 5 years as AMS, that's the short acronym for AWS Managed Services, was built and developed, and we heard a lot of feedback from our customers in the enterprise space. Primarily, they want to accelerate transformation initiatives and figure out how to get a fast path towards leveraging a true cloud-native higher-level services. They have a desire to operate at scale in the cloud, but often lack the in-house skills or processes, people, and tools to actually pull that off in a reasonable time frame to support a broader transformation goal. Very often, operational security and compliance barriers or requirements that are needed to support the business and the verticals in which they operate are either difficult to achieve or very confusing early on to assemble all of the various services and offerings from AWS to support that compliance and security foundation outcome. They want visibility into how their IT estate as it moves towards the cloud is being built, operated, what tools are used around it. And that's really a pushback against long-term legacy outsourcing methodologies that were very often outcome-based, but not much detail given to that customer and how those outcomes are being achieved. And of course, everybody has cost on their mind. So how do we reduce operating costs by moving to the cloud, while pushing in agility for the business by using cloud technology. And then contractually, they wanted to avoid a lock-in scenario to either from being locked into individual tools and processes or locked into individual vendors. And putting all that together, what we've seen over the last couple of years, and Gartner did a study, I believe, late 2018 or 2019, that said nearly 90% of enterprise organizations state a cloud-first strategy or cloud-first agenda and objective. Yet almost the same amount, 85, 86% of the enterprise infrastructure spend is still on-premise based or prem technology focused. So there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of what the business wants to do and what the business is capable of doing and what's actually happening in the enterprise landscape. So as we looked at the enterprise customer journey, when we started developing and continuing to develop the AMS service, we saw 5 or so key areas that we really focus on helping give our enterprise customers answers. So one is around how do we get them to build a foundational environment that wraps in a high degree of security, can support compliance outcomes, and also leverage reliability constructs that are resident in the AWS cloud, such as multi-AZ, multi-region, et cetera. Also, we really looked at how do we help customers shrink the timeline from getting the concept of migration and cloud consumption and cloud adoption into practical reality of running workloads in production and making that timeline as short as possible. Because really, we want to help get the flywheel started for our customers of migrate, optimize, modernize, and ultimately innovate on the AWS cloud ecosystem. Our customers require advanced migration skills now. So how do we give them access to cloud architects, to our architecture, to subject matter experts that can help them get those workloads identified, re-platformed as required, and moved over to the AMS, AWS environments so they can start leveraging cloud and getting experience-based learning. Operating models. Very often, traditional enterprise customers that we talked to early on, and even to this point today, they tried to overlay their current on-prem operating constructs onto the cloud. And while that may have worked as customers, or may work while customers have 2, 3, 4, 5, or a small number of workloads on the AWS cloud, once they attempt to achieve scale, that operating model becomes a critical path blocker In some cases, it creates operational pain that discourages the business from really leaning into cloud adoption, all the benefits around it. And then from a service perspective, lack of flexible terms and pricing. And in AWS growth and AWS utility-based consumption, approaches and methodologies, that's understood today. But we AMS extended that utility-based consumption ordered approach to consuming managed services onto our service. So our service mirrors the agility and the burst up, burst down nature of the Amazon cloud in general. So why is it challenging? Well, start with the most obvious pain point, which is really around cloud talent is hard to find. We AWS, all of the enterprise customers out there, and our partners, et cetera, we're all looking, for high-end cloud talent, what we can acquire and what we can bring in and build. So if an enterprise customer has a large migration pathway in front of them, it's very difficult for them to find the resources fast enough, either via direct hire in their business or assembling a collection of partners to help them through that. The majority of the work around foundational laydown and early migration and early optimization is not exceptionally differentiating to the business. Essentially, if you're looking at traditional architectures, they are desirous of moving those workloads in pretty much as is, getting into an optimized, modernized curve pretty quickly, and then over time innovating and breaking those down to microservices. But early on, much of that work is not differentiated. It's very infrastructure or plumbing oriented, and it tends to be a lot of effort for no visible benefit if you're not moving at a rapid pace or at scale. Legacy approaches, both from a data center management perspective, and if you look at some of the traditional old guard outsourcing constructs, tend to be labor arbitrage based. So you don't really get the benefits of automation and scale coming at a pace that can kind of map what the business strategy is in terms of rapid cloud adoption, to support agility and digital transformation. And then a lot of the contracts around premise-based software and tooling around traditional outsourced contracts are typically very heavyweight in nature, and the SLAs are highly reactive and somewhat constrictive from the perspective that they really are a protection factor for the provider or the software company or the service provider, and not really an SLA that's supporting the customer outcomes of agility and reliability and scalability. So taking all that and looking at cloud adoption, reality, and again, this graphic showing now and the conversation around this is not unusual, but typically enterprises start with project-based workloads. They get their proverbial feet wet, in the cloud and run a few projects and experiments. They then start to look at foundation, and AMS contributes here, which I'll come back to in a minute. But they then, as they attempt to move from project-based work into something more scalable, they look to lay down a foundation. So they are trying to describe and build the operating model and the technical foundation that can support scale cloud operations. But they're doing that really with no requisite experience-based learning. So it's all theoretical at that point in time. They then start to migrate. And as you have a core group of cloud aware professionals in a client business, as they begin to migrate, those cloud resources become consumed not only with migration, but also operating what has been migrated over. And that really bumps to the operational side. So as workloads come into operational status on the cloud, then you have the migration pace being disrupted by operational constructs and processes that aren't cloud aware, a limited set of people trying to span both worlds, and you have what we call the great stall. And really, it's a directional stall in terms of it slows down the business's strategic journey towards outcomes that are transformation oriented, because a legacy operating model that should have been well conceived, articulated, and built at the foundational stage was not. So it becomes a mid-stage or a mid-journey blocker to the business moving at pace and at scale. And again, keep in mind, the whole idea is for us to get to cloud native services over time, and over time should be as short as possible. And legacy operating models are at another friction point there. So we built the AMS, AWS Managed Services, or AMS for short. So we built the service to help customers get this journey started and get the flywheel transformation started inside the business so they can leverage cloud. And loosely breaking this down into about 6 key areas, starting at the lower left. So AMS comes out of the box with a prescriptive guided architecture. And that architecture has a defined business outcome of secure, compliant, and scalable. So the AMS architecture out of the box comes with PCI DSS attestation in place. We have 4 flavors of ISO, 9001, 27001, 17, and 18. We're HIPAA eligible. We benchmarked ourselves to the NIST security framework, and our Omnis are benchmarked to CIS. So we do a lot of foundational heavy lifting and then layer operations on top of that so that the customer has a secure, scalable start point to bring in those first tranche of workloads and get the optimize, modernize, innovate flywheel started. We're fueled by automation. Typical Amazon methodology is we start with a clean sheet of paper and work backwards from what we perceived as traditional large enterprise pain points or challenges which they wanted to overcome. So everything we've done with the service to date is really about how do we automate away all the undifferentiated tasks, away from humans onto automation, so that all of the subject matter experts and cloud experts can focus on what really matters in the business. And we give them access to the same experts that we use to build our service indirectly and directly through service delivery when they're running on the AMS platform. So they can reach in and use AMS as an example of what good looks like for that legacy or mode 1 or mode 1.5 operations. We also offer ongoing cost optimization. And that really is a byproduct of our automation bent. So we use AI and ML to run across the environments, and we continually suggest back to the customer ways for them to improve capacity management and service selection to drive efficiency into the environment and drive cost out. Think about little things like right-sizing EC2 instances post-migration to be reflective of what the workload really needs to run. Think about using auto-scaling. Think about us suggesting to run SQL from off-box onto RDS, for example. So a series of small, continual changes that we bring back in the form of recommendations to the customer, and then if they say yes, we help them accomplish that right sizing and the use of other AWS services to drive cost out and efficiency in. No vendor lock-in. And this really is from the perspective that AMS, with the exception of what we do for endpoint protection, is leveraging all of the tools that AWS customers have access to in non-AMS managed environments. Think about things like CloudWatch and CloudTrail and Trusted Advisors. So we're using all of the table stakes management tools that AWS offers generally, and we're putting them together in a best practices fashion and layering our change management across it to give you that experience. But suffice it to say, we aren't using any black box tools or processes that can't be freely used or freely accessed from the AWS ecosystem elsewhere. And then contractually, AMS is a month-to-month service, and we are based upon consumption-based pricing for how we price our service. And again, that's really to pattern and mirror what AWS in general has done with the utility compute model, is we want customers to be able to scale their use of AMS up and down as it fits with their overall migration, optimize, and modernization strategy. And we also want them to use the service for as long as it makes sense for them to use it, not because there's an arbitrary contract term in place. So customers can use us as a bridge for migration, as a holding pen, if you will, for legacy components of workloads that cannot or will not be modernized. But again, the customer can describe and define where they can get value from AMS for the period that makes sense to them. And really, when we look at what is AWS Managed Services, well, we cover, and again, using ITIL-based terminology, some very key core areas that are required for cloud operations, but typically are less differentiating, but very, very necessary. So we handle provisioning and onboarding, coordination of provisioning and onboarding of stacks coming into the environment. We handle security and compliance, as we discussed earlier. We make sure that all of the tooling associated with operations in the cloud is launched and deployed against the environment when infrastructure is provisioned. We provide our customers insights and cost optimization pathways on the running environments. We handle critical things like OS level patching and backup and continuity in terms of snapshots. We handle and coordinate all change management and become an API endpoint for customers' ITSM processes and business flows and rules, to request infrastructure, provisioning, incident requests, et cetera. And of course, we handle service integration, and that's really a two-layered integration point. We handle integration with a growing ecosystem of AMS managed AWS services, and we also continually improve our interfaces that our customers use to integrate their ITSM, like ServiceNow, for example, back into the service to help them streamline their operations. And what is the value? I mean, so it's all about acceleration. So we accelerate migration to the cloud because, again, we bring a prescriptive foundational architecture complete with operational tools and processes and a compliance benchmark and the attestations behind it, get to the table immediately so the customer doesn't have to worry about building from the ground up on something that we've already built and figured out for them. We help them reduce operational costs and give them a pathway to drive that ROI back into the optimized, modernized, innovate flywheel. We reduce security and compliance risk. That's both operational security and compliance. That's vendor risk and general compliance risk by providing a raft of attestations, PCI, SOC, HIPAA, ISO, operational playbooks and awareness, that are freely visible and transparent to the customer. All this drives back into allowing the business to focus on innovation, because the mundane task of infrastructure operations is not where the strategic vision of the business is going to be empowered. That's by focusing on innovation, which is really how do we get to higher level AWS cloud services that let us build net new applications and drive agility and net new offerings into our software sets to delight our internal, external customers and clients. We empower your IT team. Again, so as we go through this process of onboarding and ongoing continual operations and improvement, we help traditional enterprise IT teams and application infrastructure teams begin to build muscle around making subtle changes to architectures and construction of infrastructure stacks to support workloads that drive real value into the business. And again, we mentioned before, SQL off-box onto RDS. How do you leverage auto scaling? How do you contemplate maybe exiting an Oracle database onto RDS Aurora? How do you look at really leveraging auto scaling or refactoring a portion of your monolithic application to leverage Lambda or other higher level services that will get you down that cloud native pathway? And we also leverage best practices. And as Michael will discuss later, what we've done with the architectural foundation of AMS has really kept pace with how AWS generally has evolved our architectural approach to landing zone design and foundational laydown. So said differently, where do we look or how do we fit into the overall life cycle for a customer? AMS is infrastructure operations, compliance, security, up to and including the patched OS layer. So we take a set of AWS services, EC2, S3, et cetera, wrap those around with curated AWS management tools, things like Trusted Advisor, CloudWatch, CloudTrail, and our change management system. And we offer you an automated infrastructure operational platform to migrate and begin your optimization and modernization journey on that's compliant and secure. Above the OS layer, we look to the customer or partners or a combination of both to deliver application operations and application development. And applications in this sense is really middleware and up. It's really anything that's serving your internal and external customers. So what does a customer journey look like, and what do you get at these various points in time? So again, we are an API endpoint for infrastructure operations, and that's your change management, your incident coordination, service request coordination, et cetera. We offer dedicated AWS employees. So the AMS team is a standalone group inside of Amazon Web Services. We offer follow the sun coverage today around the globe with support in English. And as mentioned earlier, we offer offer multiple compliance certifications. So when do you get it? Well, after you say yes, AMS can help an enterprise customer, achieve the objectives which they want to strategically. Then we onboard. So we establish a landing zone. We integrate security protocols and security processes, and we do operational integration. And that's really led by a system integrator. And that system integrator can be Amazon Web Services Professional Services, or any collection of our partner ecosystem, consulting partners to help that. And of course, AMS supports that, specifically through Michael's team, with technical resources to help translate requirements and make sure that the SI partner and the business understand what's required across the journey. And the environment's built, which typically goes very, very quickly, and Michael will cover off on that in a bit. You then migrate and deploy infrastructure into the environment and begin to bring applications over. And the minute you provision infrastructure into the environment, and we are operating. So as you bring workloads in, whether it's net new build or migration, we take operational responsibility, within the framework that was described in the onboarding step. And then you're in the operate phase. So we're doing all of the core IO functionality, incident management, change management, backup continuity, patching, security and compliance, cost optimization. All of that is running 24/7, 365, the moment that first stack hits the environment. So kind of going one layer deeper, integration, how we envision integration between a customer's operating teams and AWS Managed Services. Well, we have a console-based experience that really is targeted for migration and an early use of AMS. And that console gets you started with AMS very, very quickly, allows you to get a handful of workloads in that you can do deeper operational integration, one of which most likely will be ITSM integration to a tool such as ServiceNow or Remedy or any of the other tools available on the market today. We have also built a ServiceNow connector application that brings our basic console user experience into a single pane of glass within ServiceNow. We did focus on ServiceNow deliberately because over the last 3.5 years, the vast majority of our clients are either on ServiceNow or heading that way from the clients that we intersect with at the large enterprise side. So we felt it was efficient for us to start building integrations into that platform early on. We probably will extend that to other providers later, but currently this is where we've started. And again, the goal is to have a complete ITSM solution that's built central to the business that then becomes the center of excellence and center of operational integrity that spans out and leverages AMS plus other AWS cloud resources as a cloud provider. Where are we available? This slide is always evolving, but essentially we are extending out to virtually every commercial region around the globe. And we have AMS AMS product team resources spread out between essentially Seattle, East Coast of the United States, Dublin, and Sydney. But we really want to have a presence from a human perspective. So everybody that you have to interact with, you're already always interacting with them in business hours. From a AWS region perspective, you can see on the map that we have a pretty good coverage now, and we are essentially launching across all other AWS commercial regions over the coming months. Customer sample. So just 6 logos that we pulled together. So National Australia Bank, Scotia Gas, Information Builders, Origin Energy, GE, Pearson Education. The thing to note here is that virtually 4 of those, or 5 of those 6, are in compliance-centric industries. So again, where we have industries like banking or infrastructure for natural gas delivery, or in case Information Builders, financial data analytics, where they have a compliance question that needs to be solved and answered before they can do significant scaling into the cloud, AMS becomes even more attractive in those scenarios because, again, our architecture and our operational model and processes, the documentation of all those things, it gives them a bootstrap way and you have to get scale in the cloud very, very quickly. Pricing, again, reach out to AWS Business Development and your account team, but we are an uplift on underlying infrastructure consumption. And we really offer two tiers of service, a 4-hour resolution tier and a 12-hour resolution tier. That can be mixed and matched within the environment. So really, that general uplift, if you want to look at a commercial cost of AMS, for a scaled environment, if you were to estimate 25% of your EC2 spend, whether that's on demand or EDP price or even reserved instance pricing, that'll give you a representative example of what a scaled environment for AWS will cost to operate. And again, please keep in mind and remember that we don't charge at things like storage, so S3, EFS, Glacier, and CloudFront. We do offer operational value on top of them, but it's pure automation for us, so we don't charge for it. Enterprise support functionality is included behind the scenes and delivered by AMS on AMS operated accounts. Our minimums there are shared side to side, so you aren't paying a minimum for both AMS and enterprise support. And again, the tiers are mix and match. So next steps, really to get started, we can do conversations with you or your customers around the AMS operational outcomes, and you do a very basic assessment of whether AMS can really help you achieve your innovation and modernization outcomes. And then followed up with a technical deep dive that's hosted by Michael Eshu's team or one of his team members to really describe requirements and technical nuances and considerations to be made. And then, pending that, go into a workshop where we really use that to describe the onboarding process and what the SI landscape looks like, et cetera, and how you get from point A to point B. And then, of course, you move into your traditional consulting steps of onboarding planning. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michael. And Michael can maybe discuss a little bit for us around the onboarding journey and the technical requirements and what works, what doesn't work. Michael?
Yeah, sure. Well, and I'm happy to go into that. I just before you get off that easy, Trace, I had a few questions for you.
Sure.
On its surface, right here we have a service that's assisting customers with their infrastructure operations. A platform that's focused on automation, driving automated outcomes. As you think through some of the customers you worked with over the last year or two, or even three, what are some examples of kind of the customer outcomes you've been most excited by as you've watched the service grow?
I'd probably break it down into 2 or 3 buckets. One, we discussed it earlier, was information builders, an ISV use case. And that was a great example of that customer looking to scale out their use of cloud to offer extended outcomes and resiliency to their clients. And again, they were in the financial analytics space, or they are in the financial analytics space. So we started talking to them. It became readily apparent that we had a strong resonation with them around our compliance footprint and posture that let them make some very rapid moves into the cloud that otherwise wouldn't have been possible if they'd had to go that journey one step at a time and build it all on their own. Second one would really be around transformation and how we've helped that at a large scale. Again, thinking another financially oriented company had spent about 2 years trying to get some of their core business value applications moved over to the cloud. And they spent 2 years, a lot of time and dollars and man hours, and had very little to show for it. And we ended up getting in touch with them, or they got in touch with us. And in the space of less than about 6 months, we helped them migrate 2 of their 4 largest applications over to AMS. And really, the interesting story is they came in very traditional in their architecture. And in the intervening 6 months since that first large application hit, they have refactored and modernized about 70% of it. So that really got them to use things like Lambda and Fargate and all the higher level services that before was blocked just because they couldn't figure out how to get the migrate optimize phase started. And then really the third use case was around National Australia Bank, where they have virtually no IT staff. And we worked with them over about a 6-month period and helped them chart a course where they are migrating applications at a rapid clip and doing modernization, and all with an IT staff that is exceptionally small for an organization of their size. So really, letting them leverage the AMS automation back end to achieve scale for a business that otherwise wouldn't be able to do that without that support.
Because they had done so much of that outsourcing to other partners they're using today that might not be cloud capable.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think that does a good job of setting me up to kind of answer your initial question around what does that journey look like. And when I think about the journey, for me, it sounds cliche, but I talk to customers about it all the time. And at first, It does sound cliche, and then they get past the fact that it's cliche and accept that it's actually probably the most solid strategy you can use when thinking through cloud adoption, which is to follow people, process, and technology or tools. And I think the NAB use case resonates really well. NAB is doing a whole bunch of innovation stuff to build, more competitive banking applications. You can just Google the National Australia Bank cloud adoption. There's tons of press on it. And they thought really holistically about their people. They said, look, for the people that we do have on staff, we want them focused on our innovation use cases. We want them to focus on building world-class banking experiences. But we do have all these table stakes applications, and so we're probably going to have more than one operating model. And that's a theme I remind customers all the time in this moment of fan out. There's just more and more operating models. You're gonna have your cloud operating models. You might have some SaaS operating models if you're purchasing software as a service. You might have co-location services. I love to remind IT folks that the Wi-Fi appliances in the office are still IT appliances, IT assets. They're in your CMDB. They still need to be managed. And of course, the way we're going to manage hardware is going to be different than the operating model we use to manage cloud. And in fact, within cloud, we're going to have multiple operating models for our more innovation opportunities. But then we've also got to drive our table stakes applications that are running our day-to-day business services. And so the first question is, who's going to focus on that? Is it going to be existing staff? Are you going to be able to consume a service such as AMS is giving you automated outcomes? Are you going to look to other partners in your partner ecosystem? All great debate. Those are internal strategy, and of course, AWS Professional Services has people that can help advise you on that. You have people inside your own organization that help advise you with that. And once you've decided who's going to do what, then we can start integrating process and we can integrate technology, right? Sometimes we want to jump right off and start talking about ITSM integration right away. And I'll often tell customers to pump the brakes a little bit. First, think about the people in the process, and then you can get to the technical outcomes of integrating that and making that very easy for those people who are going to be doing that work. So for me, that journey is always about determining who's going to do what and why, and building a business case around that. And once you've done that, start plugging in the different organizational entities from a people perspective to do that work. And then integrate, enhance or integrate or rebuild the processes. One of my favorite stories is a customer that realized their AD processes or policies was from the mid 2000s and hadn't even contemplated the existence of cloud. We can safely and securely run Active Directory in cloud today, though a policy may dictate you're only allowed to do that in your own data center on bare metal. Well, those are thinking that was in place before cloud existed.
And it's all about really having that strategic business outcome defined by the business that the people, process, and tools support.
Exactly. The why, right? Like, why are these people going to be putting effort into yours? Because we have to do it for compliance or regulatory or legal reasons? Are we doing it because we're trying to transform our business?
Whatever it is, yeah.
There's all sorts of good why answers, and why is going to drive what the investment you make in a given operating model is, and it's going to drive you to contemplate the different technology providers that can help you, the different process providers that can help you, and certainly the different people providers that can help you.
So another question for you. So really, who can deliver this? I mean, I'm not talking about the actual onboarding project-based work. I mean, who do you see delivering this for our customers?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it, right? We've made a decision. We very much focus on leveraging our platform to drive operations for our customers' infrastructure. And so as part of that, we decided not to go build a professional services organization, and because AWS already has such a vast systems integration partner ecosystem. We have tons of partners we work with. We're working with new partners all the time. So, if you have a partner that you're particularly favor driving your cloud implementation, but perhaps they haven't worked with AMS before, we're happy to train them up and get them capable. But you can go to our website and you can search for AWS Managed Services Partners. Don't confuse that with the AWS Managed Services Partner Program, which is the list of partners that provide managed services. And you can look at the partners who are highlighting on our webpage, or you can work with AWS Professional Services. We're happy to work with anybody, but we focus on those ongoing operational outcomes via our platform versus the projects to get on board. However, we do have a team of people that ensures new partners that would like to do that project-based work are able to get trained up quickly, enabled with a whole bunch of collateral to assist them in the delivery, and then drive the implementation at your business.
Okay. So maybe coming at this from a different direction, let me ask you a little bit about, so you've been with AMS for a number of years. Maybe in the last 12 months, you kind of give me a feel for what we've done to evolve our platform. both from an architecture and maybe operational? And what's some of the big things you've seen develop as a result of customer feedback?
Indeed, I'd say first and foremost, above all else, is we're soon we've just launched a service called Managed AWS Landing Zone. So again, you can look up AWS Landing Zone, and we're offering a service that will operate that on behalf of customers. We'll help you drive the implementation of that, look after the networking, the access management, the logging, the monitoring, and so on of that environment. So it's a pretty significant enhancement to the landing zone that AWS is offering today. We've done a ton of work around CloudFormation ingestion, allowing you to script out the CloudFormation stack that you'd like to deploy into the environment. We run a suite of preventative controls to ensure what you're deploying into the environment is compliant with the AMS operational best practices. You've got CloudWatch alarm set, you've got security groups properly configured, and so on. So really excited about that. And we continue to add support for more and more operating systems. We've released support for CentOS. We're releasing support for SUSE and other types of opportunities we have to expand our operating system support and continuing to enhance the sets of routines that run to allow you to deploy your workload into our platform and then integrate that agentry on the instances with our platform. For example, installing AWS Simple Systems Manager, which we're going to use for patch and configuration management, installing the CloudWatch agent, which we're going to use for CloudWatch log integration, monitoring, and so on. So always enhancing, the platform's always evolving, and we're excited to share those releases with our customers.
Sure. So what other questions do you have for me?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll stop and say, I kind of walked through the technical journey, and I think you mentioned it before. If a customer wants to engage tomorrow, they think this is something that could move their business forward. How would they start that process from a business perspective?
Sure. So from a business perspective, if that customer already has access to or insight to who their AWS account manager is, great place to start. Or if they're using a preferred consulting partner, start with that partner. They'll reach out to the AWS business development team that I oversee and take care of. And we will engage with the customer to do a series of conversations around what is AMS, what business value and outcomes do we drive. Then over a very short period of time, get a little bit deeper. What are some of the technical considerations that you have at a high level? How does a commercial model look like, et cetera? And walk them through that process. And then we will help them engage with an SI of choice if it's coming through our account team. And then, of course, work through any of the contracting components as it relates to our general availability agreement, et cetera. But business development becomes a quarterback for that. And we help the field seller, the partner sales team, interact with AWS in general, AMS as a product team, our SI partner ecosystem, our commercial team, et cetera, to help them get that entire experience laid out in front of them in a very logical fashion.
Sounds good. Well, let's turn our attention now to some of the Q&A that's coming in via the chat/webinar platform. We'll be answering some in writing with some of our colleagues helping us with that, and then we'll take a few here as well. So please send your questions if you haven't done already. Let's see what we've got.